if we can talk about control, telling the truth, lying, jealousy, and belief as concepts that are in this play, but which obviously still exist today, then we give the play sort of like time portals to speak across time.
Hi there, I'm Annalisa, and I chatted with Garreth where he told me about how he uses discussions to teach the play Othello. We also talked about how he uses the AI tools in Parlay and how he sees AI being valuable for students. I hope you enjoy.
What are you teaching right now? And yeah, we'll start there.
So in English, just finished with the play Othello, but we've been working through it in several different ways. But the goal was to do this as sort of like a project based unit. So they chose projects early in the play after they got to know the characters and things, and they had a few days in early April to work on the initial parts of the project. And then we're finishing now after we've read the play and watched the final scene. And they're working on pulling those projects together. But before we started the play and right after we finished, I used Parlay at the front because when I teach Othello, I use a concept based method of teaching. So I've defined 5 separate concepts that we use as lenses through which to view the play. So rather than the play just sitting as this static thing, yes, I studied Othello, if we can talk about control, telling the truth, lying, jealousy, and belief as concepts that are in this play, but which obviously still exist today, then we give the play sort of like time portals to speak across time, right? So we started with a parlay on Othello that I found in the universe, and it was on truth and lies. There's a TED talk about how can you recognize when someone is lying or telling the truth. And then we ended with another one that I found on in the universe on is Othello a tragic hero? Which is one of the content pieces, right? You want to talk about, is Othello a tragic hero? It's a tragedy. What does it mean to be a tragic hero? So I use them there, and each class within their own classroom was, responding to questions and then responding to each other.
Are you saying that before you actually introduce the text itself, or before you even open it up, you're kind of framing it with the discussion about those bigger ideas or those
Yeah,
themes that
absolutely.
are going to come
Yep.
up? Okay,
Yeah.
that's really
Because
cool.
otherwise it just becomes, here's something we have to do from the curriculum, rather than the curriculum exists because it speaks to these enduring understandings about human existence.
Definitely. Well, what does discussion look like then in a unit like Othello?
So throughout the text, there were a couple different ways that I did discussion. One was obviously, with parlay at the front and the end, these kind of asynchronous, these are written round tables that I used. But during the play, at the middle of the play, we did a Socratic seminar. I had them focusing on certain characters and then also on the concepts again. They worked in groups that come up with questions about the text. And then we did a Socratic seminar. When I do Socratic seminar, I do an inside outside circle. So, fishbowl style. So that makes them feel a little more, for some of them, they feel like they're being watched, but it actually turns out that they like speaking in smaller groups more than in the large group. So, and especially this year, I don't know. I mean, I do a lot of dialogical work in my classroom, not only with Parlay and with Socratic seminars or novel chats, but I use a project called the Touchstones Discussion Project, and I've used that for like almost 30 years. This year's students, I would say, have had the hardest time engaging with each other in large group discussions. So when we break it down and give them smaller groups to work in, which they actually asked for, that seems to work better for them. As well as the asynchronous discussions through Parlay, that works too. So we have a Socratic seminar in the middle. Then we did small breakout discussions based on annotations that I asked them to work through in Acts 3 and 4. Yeah, and that's really where we are.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm hearing is that you're kind of using the discussions as almost like posts throughout the discussion as a way to
Yes.
kind of like bring students in to talk about these ideas with each other and
Yeah.
really allow for the exchange of some of those ideas and connections to maybe their lives.
Yeah. And I mean,
Um,
I hope most English teachers, I think most English teachers are doing that, giving opportunities for discussion. That's what adults do when we read books, we talk about them, right? So I'd hope that that's what we're doing. What I like is that when I choose the assessment areas that I want, to focus on. So like this time it was connecting ideas, bringing up new insights and using evidence. The AI is always speaking back to specifically those areas.
what have you noticed has been the effect on the conversations in the classroom compared to not using it? Both from your perspective and obviously from the student perspective and what you've heard from them.
Yeah, so I actually used it, like, I think I found it 3 days after the pandemic started, right? So I was because as someone who uses a lot of dialogic learning in my classroom, I'm like, "How am I gonna do this if we're all locked on, to screens or whatever?" What I saw then and what I see now is it encourages a lot of students, and especially now, like, and I don't I this is my 31st year of teaching. And obviously, anybody who's taught for that long can say things like, "Oh, these kids today, boy, they're not like they were 20 or 30 years ago, right? Those kids, they knew." Everybody's different. The world, we always grow up in the world that we're born into, and that's always changing. These students obviously are still figuring out how to interact with each other face to face more so than I have seen in the past. And I mean, I say that as somebody who I said I use this program called the Touchstones Discussion Project, which is big circle, small group, individual work, small group work, and then large circle discussions. And it's all about the face to face, real time, round table type discussions. And I have seen a drop off in participation. But with Parlay, what they recognize is one, because I have the anonymity turned on, that they feel okay. So, like here, I'm really just focusing on what the content is and not on who the person is. And that they find that really useful, especially the students who are more reticent to jump into face-to-face discussions. So that's a really important aspect, and something that if I were to come back, next year to Parlay, I would be looking to roll that out in the beginning of the year, and then start talking about, well, what if we remove these, right? Like, what if we start talking as our authentic selves? And not that you're not talking authentically behind the, Grace Hopper or Mary Shelley or something like that. But what does it mean to like really speak as yourself, right? I'd love to see how that progresses, and I hope you have some teachers who have done that, like rolled it out that way, because I'd love to see some of the research or at least the anecdotal responses on that. Yeah, I think there's a comfort level with discussing this way, especially in classes. And I have a class this year that is, and again, somebody with as much experience as I have can say things like, in all 31 years of my teaching, this class, the dynamic within this class is the worst. Now, I'm not going to say it's the worst, but it is one of the most challenging for the students as well as for myself. And Parlay has ameliorated that and has allowed for, I think, deeper discussions to happen. And for that, I'm very grateful. Yeah. As far as assessment, and I was having this discussion on LinkedIn the other day, because I think assessment is always happening, right? Like if I'm not assessing you, and I'm not saying that I'm some big brother eye watching all the time, but if I'm not taking the temperature of you and of the classroom and trying to figure out where you are and what you need, then I am not a learner in the classroom, right? Like, so in my classroom, I've always said that if there's 24 students, it's actually 25 because I'm a learner as well. I can't be a good teacher if I'm not learning from you what kind of things you need. And that means that I have to always be assessing, whether it's listening in on a discussion and offering some feedback right away, whether it's like grabbing your paper because you asked me to look at something and then jotting down a few notes. That's, formative assessment is always happening. I'm not all that interested in summative assessments, especially when they are test based or when what the purpose of that summative assessment is simply to take a snapshot at one small moment of time of somebody's ability to answer certain questions. So
That's really interesting, and I think makes a lot of sense too. A lot of times when we think about formative assessment, or even summative too, any form of assessment, we think of the concrete, the thing that's recorded, the thing that can be converted into evidence. However, in the classroom, it's a lot more than that. It looks a million different ways, and that's essentially what
yeah,
teach.
I
The
think
entire point is teaching is.
yeah, and the idea, and this comes from a teacher I've known for several years who's doing some really amazing work in writing pedagogy. Her name's Angela Stockman, and she got me on to referring to more to things like documentation, right? How are you documenting student growth, and how are we giving our students the power to document their own growth, right? So like if
Yeah.
if I'm doing a parlay, I may include a question, even if it's a verbal roundtable. I may ask them to take some notes and say, all right, at the end, what's a takeaway from this that you're going to keep with you? What's some piece of learning, or where did your thoughts about the text switch? Did somebody say something that made you think differently about it, right? Those kind of little, like, documenting of somebody's learning story taking a different direction. That's what I would say would be really useful.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, any other feedback that we didn't talk about, or any other ideas you wanted to go into or share?
Let me just look over here at my this one parlay I have open. I guess here's something I have a question about. So, and I'm pretty sure I told the students this. I said, but I don't think anyone used it because they just got focused on answering the questions. But I did turn on their ability to use the AI before I
Hmm.
used the AI. How does that work? Like, what's the
Yeah.
mechanism for that?
Do you have the discussion open in your tab there?
I have it open. Yeah.
All right. So basically, when you'll know if any of them used it, if you click the three dots beside their post, and you'll see Parlay Genie. So if they did not use it, then you will not see that in the three little dots beside their
Got it.
post. But for the
Okay.
students that did, then you'll be able to click it, and it will show you the feedback that the Genie gave to them on their post, and whether or not they changed their actual uh,
Oh, really? It'll
idea.
do that? Oh, all
Yes.
right. I'm gonna
Yes.
have to try that next time. I'm really
So
interested.
go and have a look in. I'm sure one of them must have clicked it, even if they didn't even edit their idea. I'm sure one of them did it.
Okay,
So
we'll
just
have to take
click
a
the
look.
little
Yeah.
three dots, and
Yep.
you'll be able to see that. What it looks like on their end is basically when they're typing, as they're typing, they'll see the little Genie lamp pop up. And if they click it, actually, let me show you an example.
Yeah.
And then it's going to basically generate feedback in the form of kind of like strengths, weaknesses, and kind of like next steps in
Hmm.
accordance to the actual
Criteria.
criteria that you
Yeah.
set out. So if you're asking for textual evidence and they're not citing it, then it's going to say you did not provide textual evidence. And so of course this gives them an opportunity to edit their idea before they actually submit it and
Right.
get initial feedback.
What I'm really liking that I'm seeing as AI evolves is more along the lines of what, Sal Khan has talked about with Conmigo, which is we want this to be a tutor, right? Like, it's not giving us the answers. It's saying, here's what the student can do. How do I move the student forward, right? Um, what they call, I forget what they call, like the delta problem. Like, if you could get every student an individual tutor, right, you're going to maximize growth. Um,
Mhm.
so I find that interesting, and I can see what, just what you showed me from test, test, test. If I'm a student on the other end, there's some who are just going to ignore it and just keep going through. But I think if it comes up, enough, they're going to look at it, and they're going to see, oh, every time I go here, it's telling me to provide more evidence. Okay, I can do that
Yeah.
because, and that saves me from having to say it over and over and over again, right? So
Right, right.
it's that kind of recognition that when we're talking about academic responses to academic prompts, you generally want to include, claims, evidence, warrants, reasoning, whatever you want to call it, the Tolman
Mhm.
method or whatever. So I think that's great, and I'm definitely going to try that before the end of the year. I'm going to try that and see how that works.
in all of this, the teacher's role is so important and
Oh
will
yeah.
continue to be so important for the purpose of really that human relationship. That
Yeah.
that's why we see that in Hattie's work as being like one
Yep.
of the most important things, right? There's so much that comes from that personal relationship. So yeah, I'm curious. I'm also curious how all of this will develop.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
the
think you've done a great job of, creating a platform that really helps students um, understand what it means to speak about texts, whatever kind of texts, in meaningful ways, and to talk to other people about it rather than just answering questions on a worksheet or something like that. Um, and and I think that the addition of the AI, as you have shown it to me, I think that's really useful for them because it's immediate. They know that these aren't necessarily essay length answers that they're providing, but it's the kind of thing that if they are going to go into academia and go to the college route or whatever, they're going to be expected, to speak about things at this level and with this level of erudition. So I appreciate that.
yeah,